Sarah Chen had spent her Tuesday evening grading fourth-grade math tests when 5 armed men burst through her apartment door, demanding answers about something she supposedly knew. What they didn't realize was that the quiet elementary school teacher sipping chamomile tea had once been the CIS most effective deep-cover operative in Eastern Europe, and her peaceful retirement was about to end in the most explosive way possible. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Lincoln Elementary School's parking lot as Sarah Chen pulled her aging Honda Civic into the same spot she had occupied every weekday for the past 3 years. Before we jump back, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The car's paint had faded to a dull blue-gray that matched the overcast Seattle sky, and the small dent in the rear bumper served as a constant reminder of her first week teaching when she had misjudged the distance to the concrete barrier. Sarah gathered her canvas tote bag from the passenger seat, checking to ensure that the stack of spelling worksheets hadn't scattered during the drive from her modest apartment in the Fremont neighborhood. The bag itself told the story of her transformation from her previous life to this new existence. Where once she had carried encrypted communication devices and weapons concealed within diplomatic pouches, now she transported colored markers, stickers shaped like golden stars, and laminated educational posters featuring cartoon animals teaching multiplication tables. The weight difference was negligible, but the psychological burden felt infinitely lighter. Teaching 4th grade at Lincoln Elementary represented everything she had dreamed of during those endless nights in Prague and Budapest when sleep eluded her, and the constant vigilance required for deep cover operations threatened to consume what remained of her authentic self. Sarah's teaching wardrobe consisted entirely of cardigans in muted earth tones, comfortable flats that allowed her to navigate the school's linoleum hallways without the click of heels that might disturb neighboring classrooms, and simple jewelry that wouldn't pose safety hazards during recess supervision or art projects involving glue and glitter. The professional transformation had been deliberate and complete. Gone were the tailored suits and expensive accessories that had been essential components of her cover identity as a cultural attach at the American Embassy in Vienna. Her current appearance was carefully designed to blend seamlessly into the faculty lounge discussions about standardized testing requirements and fundraising drives for new playground equipment. The walk from the parking lot to the school's main entrance took Sarah past the basketball court, where maintenance crews were already sweeping away the autumn leaves that accumulated overnight. The custodial staff arrived before dawn to ensure that the building was clean and secure before the first buses delivered students from neighborhoods throughout the district. Sarah had developed friendly relationships with these early arriving colleagues, understanding from her intelligence training that the people who worked in support roles often possessed the most comprehensive knowledge of institutional operations and potential security vulnerabilities. Marcus Williams, the head custodian, raised his hand in greeting as Sarah approached the staff entrance. His smile was genuine and warm, the expression of someone who took pride in maintaining a clean and safe environment for the children and educators who filled the building each day. Marcus had worked at Lincoln Elementary for over 15 years, witnessing the arrival and departure of numerous principals, teachers, and district administrators while maintaining the consistent daily routines that kept the school functioning effectively. The conversation between Sarah and Marcus typically focused on weekend plans or observations about the changing weather patterns that marked the progression of the school year. This morning's exchange followed their established pattern, with Marcus mentioning his daughter's upcoming high school graduation and Sarah expressing appropriate enthusiasm about the milestone. These brief interactions represented exactly the kind of normal human connections that Sarah had missed during her years of maintaining false identities and fabricated personal histories that could never be shared with the people she encountered during intelligence operations. Inside the school building, Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Sarah made her way through corridors lined with student artwork and motivational posters, encouraging academic achievement and positive behavior choices. The walls displayed a rotating collection of projects from different grade levels, creating a colorful timeline of educational activities that changed with each new unit of study. Sarah particularly enjoyed reviewing the creative writing assignments that fourth-grade teachers posted outside their classrooms, finding inspiration in the students' imaginative stories and uninhibited approaches to narrative construction. Room 247 had become Sarah's professional sanctuary, a space where she had invested considerable time and personal resources to create an environment that encouraged learning while accommodating the diverse needs of her students. The classroom featured flexible seating arrangements that could be reconfigured for different types of instructional activities, from whole group discussions to collaborative project work that required students to move freely between learning stations. Educational posters covered nearly every available wall space, displaying everything from mathematical formulas and grammar rules to inspirational quotes about perseverance and the importance of making mistakes as part of the learning process. Sarah's desk occupied the corner position that provided optimal sight lines for monitoring student activities while maintaining easy access to instructional materials and technology resources. The surface was organized with the precision that reflected her intelligence training, though the items themselves were entirely different from the operational tools she had once managed with similar attention to detail. Color-coded folders contained lesson plans organized by subject area and week, while clear plastic containers held supplies that students might need during various activities throughout the day. The morning routine began with Sarah reviewing her lesson plans for the day while preparing materials for the first instructional period. Mathematics had always been her strongest academic subject, even before her recruitment into intelligence work, and teaching elementary mathematical concepts allowed her to share genuine enthusiasm for logical problem-solving approaches that would serve students well beyond their current grade level. Today's lesson focused on multi-step word problems that required students to identify relevant information, select appropriate operations, and verify their solutions through different methods. The challenge of teaching mathematics to fourth grade students lay not in the complexity of the content, but in the diversity of learning styles and prior knowledge levels that characterized any typical classroom. Some students arrived with strong foundational skills and confidence in their mathematical abilities, while others struggled with basic operations and required additional support to access grade-level content. Sarah had developed instructional strategies that accommodated this range of needs while maintaining appropriately high expectations for all students. Student arrival began at 7:45, marked by the distinctive sound of school buses pulling into the circular drive and the gradual increase in hallway conversations as children reunited with classmates and prepared for another day of learning. Sarah positioned herself at her classroom door to greet each student individually, a practice she had adopted during her first year of teaching after recognizing the positive impact that personal acknowledgement had on student engagement and classroom community building. 26 fourth-grade students comprise Sarah's current class roster, representing a demographic diversity that reflected the broader Lincoln Elementary community. The neighborhood served families from various economic backgrounds and cultural traditions, creating classroom dynamics that enriched discussions and provided opportunities for students to learn from one another's experiences and perspectives. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sarah particularly valued the multilingual capabilities that several students brought to classroom activities, recognizing their bilingual skills as cognitive advantages that would benefit them throughout their academic careers. Jessica Martinez was typically among the first students to arrive each morning, her backpack loaded with completed homework assignments and library books that she read voraciously during any available free time. Jessica's academic performance consistently exceeded grade-level expectations, but Sarah had learned to provide enrichment activities that challenged her intellectually, while ensuring that she remained connected to her classmates rather than isolated by her advanced abilities. The balance required careful instructional planning that met Jessica's needs without creating social barriers that might affect her peer relationships. Conversely, David Thompson often arrived at the last possible moment before the tardy bell, his homework incomplete and his demeanor suggesting that morning routines at home were chaotic and stressful. Sarah had developed strategies for supporting David's academic success that acknowledged the challenges he faced outside of school while maintaining consistent expectations for his classroom behavior and effort. The approach required patience and creativity, but Sarah had observed significant improvement in David's engagement and academic performance over the course of the school year. The first instructional period began promptly at 8:15 with a mathematics lesson that Sarah had designed to build on concepts introduced during the previous week while incorporating new problem-solving strategies that would prepare students for more complex applications. The lesson structure included multiple opportunities for student participation, from individual practice time to collaborative problem-solving sessions that encouraged peer support and mathematical discourse. Sarah moved throughout the classroom during the lesson, monitoring student understanding through observation and brief, individual conferences that allowed her to provide immediate feedback and adjustment to instruction when necessary. This teaching approach reflected her intelligence training in situational awareness and rapid assessment of changing conditions, though applied to educational rather than operational contexts. Her ability to simultaneously track multiple student needs while maintaining overall classroom management had impressed her principal during formal evaluations and contributed to her reputation as an effective educator. The mathematics lesson concluded with students sharing their problem-solving strategies and explaining their reasoning to classmates, creating opportunities for learning that extended beyond the correct answers to include understanding of mathematical thinking processes. Sarah facilitated these discussions with questions that encouraged students to compare different approaches and consider the efficiency and accuracy of various solution methods. These conversations often revealed misconceptions that could be addressed immediately rather than allowing them to compound into larger learning obstacles. Between instructional periods, Sarah used transition time to prepare materials for the next lesson while monitoring student activities and addressing individual needs that arose throughout the morning. The classroom operated according to established routines that students had internalized during the first weeks of school, allowing for smooth transitions that maximized instructional time, while maintaining the structured environment that supported effective learning for all students. Language arts instruction followed mathematics, focusing on reading comprehension strategies that would support students across all academic subjects. Sarah had selected a novel that featured characters facing challenges that required problem-solving and collaboration, themes that connected to broader classroom discussions about perseverance and the importance of seeking help when encountering difficulties. The story provided natural opportunities for vocabulary development and critical thinking activities that extended students' analytical capabilities. During reading instruction, Sarah organized students into flexible groups based on their current reading levels and specific skill development needs. This differentiated approach ensured that all students received instruction that was appropriately challenging while building toward common learning objectives that aligned with grade-level standards. The group configurations changed regularly, based on ongoing assessment data that Sarah collected through various formal and informal measures. Lunch duty represented a brief respite from direct instruction, though Sarah remained actively engaged in supervision and relationship building, activities that contributed to positive school climate. The cafeteria environment provided opportunities to observe student social interactions and identify potential issues that might affect classroom dynamics or individual student well-being. Sarah had learned to recognize signs of stress or conflict among students, drawing on her intelligence training and behavioral analysis to intervene appropriately when situations required adult support. The afternoon instructional schedule included science and social studies lessons that Sarah often integrated to provide students with authentic context for applying skills from mathematics and language arts. Today's science lesson focused on data collection and analysis related to weather patterns, requiring students to use mathematical operations while developing written explanations of their observations and conclusions. This interdisciplinary approach reflected Sarah's understanding that real-world problems rarely confine themselves to single academic subjects. Science instruction at the elementary level emphasized hands-on investigation and inquiry-based learning that encouraged students to ask questions, develop hypotheses, and design experiments to test their ideas. Sarah had invested her own resources in laboratory materials and equipment that supported engaging science activities, recognizing that student enthusiasm for scientific inquiry often developed during elementary years and influenced their attitudes toward STEM subjects throughout their academic careers. The final instructional period of the day provided time for students to complete assignments, receive additional support in areas where they struggled, or engage in enrichment activities that extended their learning beyond basic grade-level requirements. Sarah used this time to conduct individual conferences with students about their academic progress and personal goals, building relationships that supported their overall development as learners and individuals. Student dismissal began at 3:20, with bus riders gathering in designated areas while students who walked home or were picked up by family members waited in the classroom until their transportation arrived. Sarah supervised this process while completing end-of-day tasks that prepared her classroom for the following day's instruction. The routine included organizing materials, updating assignment records, and reviewing lesson plans to ensure that any necessary modifications could be implemented before the next day's instruction. After students departed, Sarah typically remained in her classroom for at least an hour to complete grading, prepare instructional materials for upcoming lessons, and respond to emails from parents or administrators that required attention. This extended workday was standard among dedicated teachers who recognized that effective instruction required significant preparation time beyond the contracted school hours. Sarah approached this responsibility with the same attention to detail that had characterized her intelligence work, understanding that thorough preparation directly influenced student success. The gradual emptying of the school building marked the transition from Sarah's professional responsibilities to personal time, though the boundary between work and life remained somewhat fluid during the school year. Evening hours were often spent developing new instructional activities, researching educational strategies, or attending professional development workshops that enhanced her teaching effectiveness. The commitment to continuous improvement reflected Sarah's personality and work ethic, regardless of the professional context. Sarah's apartment in the Fremont neighborhood represented a deliberate choice to live modestly while remaining connected to the community she served professionally. The two-bedroom unit provided adequate space for her needs while allowing her to save money for classroom supplies and educational materials that supplemented the limited resources provided by the school district. The furnishing was simple and functional, reflecting her preference for minimalism that had developed during years of maintaining temporary residences in various international locations. The evening routine typically included preparation of simple meals, review of professional reading related to education, and occasional communication with former colleagues who had also transitioned away from intelligence work. These conversations were carefully managed to avoid any discussion of operational details while maintaining connections with people who understood the unique challenges of career transitions from classified government service to civilian professions. Sarah's neighborhood walks provided both physical exercise and opportunities to maintain awareness of her surroundings, a habit from her intelligence training that had never fully faded despite her commitment to civilian life. The tree-lined streets of Fremont offered a peaceful environment that contrasted sharply with the urban environments where she had conducted surveillance and counter-surveillance operations during her previous career. These walks allowed her to decompress from the day's teaching responsibilities while maintaining the physical fitness that had been essential during her operational years. The local coffee shop served as Sarah's primary social connection outside of school, a place where she could engage in casual conversations with neighbors and community members who knew her only as Miss Chen, the dedicated elementary school teacher. The baristas had learned her regular order and often asked about her students' progress, creating the kind of normal social interactions that she had missed during years of maintaining false identities and avoiding genuine personal connections that might compromise operational security. Tuesday evenings had developed into Sarah's most productive time for lesson planning and material preparation, when the quiet of her apartment and the completion of the day's grading allowed her to focus on creating engaging learning experiences for her students. The dining table served as her workspace, covered with educational resources, craft supplies, and technology tools that supported her instructional planning. This domestic scene represented everything she had hoped to achieve when she made the decision to leave intelligence work and pursue a career that allowed her to build rather than merely gather and analyze. The transition from intelligence operative to elementary school teacher had required 2 years of education coursework and student teaching experiences that provided her with the pedagogical knowledge necessary to effectively serve in her new profession. Sarah had approached this career change with the same dedication and attention to detail that had made her successful in intelligence work, recognizing that effective teaching required mastery of content knowledge, instructional strategies, and classroom management techniques that were entirely different from the skills she had developed during her operational years. Her former handler at the CIA had expressed skepticism about Sarah's decision to completely abandon intelligence work, suggesting that her skills and experience represented valuable resources that could be utilized in consulting or training roles that maintained her security clearance while providing more flexible career options. Sarah had politely declined these suggestions, explaining that her commitment to leaving that world was absolute and that she had no interest in maintaining any connections that might compromise her new identity or draw unwanted attention to her civilian life. The financial adjustment from her intelligence salary to teacher compensation had required significant lifestyle changes, but Sarah found satisfaction in the simplicity and authenticity of her current situation. The work itself provided meaning and purpose that had been missing during many of her intelligence assignments, particularly those that required her to build relationships with targets who were ultimately betrayed through her information-gathering activities. Teaching allowed her to form genuine connections with students and families while contributing positively to their lives and educational development. Professional development opportunities within the education field had provided Sarah with ongoing learning experiences that kept her intellectually engaged while building expertise in areas directly related to her current responsibilities. She had attended workshops on differentiated instruction, assessment strategies, and technology integration that enhanced her teaching effectiveness, while providing opportunities to collaborate with experienced educators who served as mentors and resources for navigating the complexities of public education. The school district's emphasis on data-driven instruction aligned well with Sarah's analytical background, though the educational applications were entirely different from intelligence analysis. Student assessment data provided insights into learning patterns and instructional effectiveness that allowed her to modify her teaching approaches to better serve individual student needs. This systematic approach to continuous improvement reflected her intelligence training while serving legitimate educational purposes that benefited her students' academic growth. Sarah's relationship with her principal, Dr. Rebecca Wilson, had evolved from initial formal interactions to mutual respect, based on Sarah's demonstrated commitment to student success and professional growth. Dr. Wilson had recognized Sarah's potential during the hiring process and had provided support and guidance that helped her navigate the transition from student teacher to independent classroom educator. Their conversations often focused on instructional strategies and student needs, creating professional collaboration that enhanced Sarah's effectiveness while contributing to overall school improvement efforts. Faculty meetings and professional learning communities provided Sarah with opportunities to collaborate with colleagues while maintaining appropriate boundaries that protected her privacy without appearing antisocial or unwilling to participate in school culture. She had learned to contribute meaningfully to discussions about educational practices while avoiding personal details that might invite closer scrutiny of her background or previous career experiences. The balance required careful attention to social dynamics while remaining authentic in her commitment to the teaching profession. Parent conferences represented one of Sarah's favorite aspects of teaching, providing opportunities to share student progress with families while building partnerships that supported learning both at school and at home. Her preparation for these conferences reflected her intelligence training in thorough research and clear communication, though applied to educational rather than operational contexts. Parents consistently expressed appreciation for her detailed knowledge of their children's academic and social development, as well as her specific suggestions for supporting continued growth. The end of October brought parent-teacher conferences that required Sarah to prepare comprehensive progress reports for each of her 26 students, documenting their academic growth, social development, and areas needing continued attention. This process involved reviewing assessment data, student work samples, and observational notes that she maintained throughout the grading period. The thoroughness of her documentation impressed parents and administrators while providing clear evidence of her students' learning trajectories and her instructional effectiveness. Halloween celebrations at Lincoln Elementary created opportunities for community building while allowing students to express creativity through costume choices and classroom activities that incorporated seasonal themes into academic content. Sarah had planned mathematics activities involving candy counting and sorting, as well as creative writing assignments that encouraged students to develop original stories featuring their costume characters. These celebrations balanced fun with learning objectives while maintaining the educational focus that characterized effective elementary instruction. The Friday afternoon faculty meeting in late October addressed standardized testing preparation and data analysis, procedures that would guide instructional planning for the remainder of the first semester. Sarah participated actively in these discussions, drawing on her analytical skills to interpret assessment results while contributing suggestions for targeted intervention strategies that would support struggling students. Her insights were valued by colleagues who recognized her ability to identify patterns and develop systematic approaches to addressing instructional challenges. After the faculty meeting, Sarah remained in her classroom to complete weekend preparation, tasks, and organize materials for the following week's instruction. The building gradually emptied as other teachers departed for weekend activities, leaving Sarah in the quiet environment where she did her most productive planning work. The solitude allowed her to focus completely on educational tasks while maintaining the awareness of her surroundings that had become second nature during her intelligence training. The parking lot was nearly empty when Sarah finally gathered her materials and prepared to leave for the weekend. The October evening air carried the crisp coolness that marked the transition toward winter, and the early darkness created shadows that stretched across the pavement. Sarah walked purposefully toward her car while maintaining casual observation of the surrounding area, a habit that had persisted despite her commitment to leaving the vigilance of intelligence work behind. As she unlocked her car door, Sarah noticed a dark sedan parked across the street that hadn't been there when she arrived that morning. The vehicle's tinted windows prevented her from observing the occupants, but something about its positioning and the fact that it remained occupied during evening hours triggered the situational awareness that she had never been able to completely suppress. She made mental note of the license plate while appearing to focus on loading her teaching materials into the back seat of her Honda. The drive home through Fremont's residential streets provided Sarah with opportunities to verify whether the sedan was following her route, using techniques that appeared to be normal navigation, while allowing her to identify any persistent surveillance. The vehicle did not appear during her drive home, suggesting that her observation had been coincidental rather than indicative of any focused attention on her activities. Nevertheless, the incident reminded her that complete separation from her former life required constant vigilance to ensure that her civilian identity remained secure. Sarah's apartment building was quiet on Friday evening, with most residents either out for weekend entertainment or settled in for peaceful evenings. At home, the lobby area was well lit and secure, with keycard access that limited entry to residents and authorized visitors. Sarah checked her mailbox before heading upstairs, finding the usual collection of bills, educational catalogs, and promotional materials that characterized her normal domestic life. The weekend ahead promised time for lesson planning, household tasks, and personal relaxation that would prepare her for another week of teaching. Sarah looked forward to these quieter periods when she could focus on reading, cooking, and maintaining the apartment that had become her refuge from both her current professional responsibilities and the memories of her former career. The simple pleasure of weekend mornings without operational briefings or surveillance requirements represented one of the most valuable aspects of her new life. Saturday morning brought rain that drummed steadily against her apartment windows, creating the perfect atmosphere for indoor activities and reflective time that Sarah used for both personal renewal and professional preparation. She prepared coffee using the French press that had become part of her weekend routine, appreciating the ritual and the quality of the beverage that represented a small luxury in her simplified lifestyle. The morning's lesson planning session focused on developing a cross-curricular unit that would integrate mathematics, science, and language arts through a project-based learning approach that encouraged student collaboration and authentic problem-solving. Sarah had researched best practices in elementary project-based learning and was excited to implement strategies that would engage her students while building skills that extended beyond traditional academic content. Weekend grocery shopping provided Sarah with opportunities to practice normal civilian interactions while maintaining awareness of her surroundings in public spaces. The neighborhood market was busy with weekend shoppers, creating natural cover for observation activities while she selected fresh produce and household necessities. These routine errands contributed to her sense of normalcy while allowing her to practice the social skills that civilian life required. Sunday morning brought clearer weather that allowed Sarah to take her regular walk through the Fremont neighborhood, observing the weekend activities of families and individuals who comprised her civilian community. Children played in yards while parents worked in gardens or engaged in household maintenance tasks that marked the rhythm of suburban life. These scenes represented the normal existence that Sarah had chosen over the uncertainty and isolation of intelligence work. The Sunday afternoon lesson planning session concluded her weekend preparation activities, leaving her ready for another week of teaching while maintaining the careful balance between professional engagement and personal privacy that characterized her new life. As she organized her materials for Monday's instruction, Sarah reflected on the satisfaction that teaching provided compared to the emptiness she had often felt during intelligence assignments that served abstract national security objectives rather than direct human benefit. Monday morning arrived with the familiar routine of driving to Lincoln Elementary and preparing for another day of instruction that would challenge her students while building their confidence and capabilities. Sarah looked forward to seeing her students and continuing the learning journeys that had become the focus of her professional energy and personal fulfillment. The transition from weekend planning to active teaching represented the most rewarding aspect of her career change, providing immediate evidence of her positive impact on young lives. As she pulled into the school parking lot, Sarah noticed the same dark sedan from the previous Friday, parked in a different location but with clear sightlines to the staff entrance. This time, her observation was more careful and systematic, noting details about the vehicle and its positioning that would allow her to determine whether its presence represented coincidence or something more concerning. The habits of intelligence work remained active despite her commitment to civilian life, creating internal tension between her desire for normalcy and the survival instincts that had kept her safe during operational years. The dark sedan appeared again on Wednesday morning, this time positioned near the intersection where Sarah typically turned into the school district. The vehicle's occupants remained obscured behind tinted windows, but the repeated presence suggested deliberate surveillance rather than coincidental encounters. Sarah modified her route slightly, taking an alternate path that required an additional 5 minutes, but allowed her to observe whether the sedan would adjust its position accordingly. When she arrived at Lincoln Elementary, the vehicle was nowhere to be seen, though she remained alert throughout the morning instructional periods. During lunch duty, Sarah positioned herself where she could observe the parking lot while supervising students at their outdoor tables. The familiar Honda Civics and Toyota Corollas of her teaching colleagues occupied their usual spaces, but she noticed an unfamiliar white van parked across the street with a clear view of the school's main entrance. The van bore commercial painting, company logos that appeared legitimate, but its positioning and the fact that no painting activity was visible in the immediate area raised questions about its actual purpose. After school, Sarah delayed her usual departure by 30 minutes, using the time to organize classroom materials while observing the parking lot through her window. The white van remained in position throughout this period, with no visible activity to suggest legitimate commercial purposes. When Sarah finally left the building, she walked directly to her car without apparent concern while mentally cataloging details about the van's license plate, company markings, and any visible occupants. The drive home revealed that both the dark sedan and white van had disappeared, but Sarah's intelligence training made her aware that surveillance teams often used multiple vehicles and varied their positions to avoid detection. She took a circuitous route through residential neighborhoods, stopping at a grocery store to purchase items she didn't actually need while observing whether any vehicles followed her movements. The exercise yielded no obvious surveillance, but Sarah's operational instincts suggested that professional watchers might be using techniques sophisticated enough to remain undetected during casual counter-surveillance efforts. That evening, Sarah activated security protocols that she had hoped never to use in her civilian life. She conducted a systematic inspection of her apartment, checking for signs of unauthorized entry or surveillance devices that might have been installed during her absence. The search revealed nothing suspicious, but she installed additional security measures, including motion-activated cameras positioned to monitor the building's entrance and parking area. These precautions represented a reluctant return to operational thinking that she had tried to leave behind. Thursday morning brought a new development when Sarah discovered that her Honda's tires had been punctured overnight, leaving her vehicle inoperable and forcing her to arrange alternative transportation to school. The damage appeared deliberate rather than accidental, with small puncture wounds that suggested professional tools rather than random vandalism. Sarah called her rideshare service while arranging for tire repair, but the incident confirmed that her civilian cover might be compromised and that hostile actors were escalating their activities. The substitute transportation allowed Sarah to observe surveillance more carefully without the responsibility of driving. and she quickly identified at least 2 vehicles that appeared to be coordinating their movements with her rideshare route. The dark sedan from earlier observations was present, along with a gray pickup truck that maintained distance while keeping her vehicle in sight. Both vehicles used professional techniques for mobile surveillance, suggesting that whoever was watching her possessed significant resources and training. At school, Sarah maintained normal teaching routines while processing the implications of confirmed surveillance and the tire sabotage that indicated hostile intent. Her students remained unaware of any security concerns, but Sarah found herself positioning her desk to maintain visual contact with classroom windows while conducting lessons. The psychological stress of returning to operational awareness while simultaneously fulfilling teaching responsibilities created internal tension that she struggled to manage without compromising either her security or her students' education. During the morning recess period, Sarah approached Dr. Wilson's office to discuss a potential family emergency that might require her to take leave from teaching duties. The conversation was carefully scripted to avoid revealing the true nature of her concerns, while establishing a plausible reason for sudden departure if circumstances required her to activate extraction protocols. Dr. Wilson expressed concern about Sarah's well-being and offered to arrange substitute teacher coverage for any period she might need to address personal matters. The afternoon brought new surveillance activity when Sarah observed unfamiliar individuals positioned near the school's perimeter during dismissal time. These watchers appeared to be conducting reconnaissance of school security procedures and student departure routines, suggesting that their interest extended beyond Sarah herself to potentially include the school community. The possibility that her presence might endanger students and colleagues added urgency to her need to understand the threat and develop appropriate responses. After students departed, Sarah remained in her classroom while using secure communication methods to contact her former CIA handler, breaking 3 years of complete separation from intelligence services. The encrypted message was brief and used code phrases that would identify her while requesting immediate assessment of potential threats to her cover identity. The response came within 2 hours, confirming that intelligence services were aware of hostile surveillance activities, but providing no details about the source or scope of the threat. The communication included instructions for Sarah to maintain normal routines while implementing enhanced security protocols that would protect her civilian identity without revealing her operational background. The guidance emphasized that any deviation from her established teacher persona could confirm suspicions and escalate dangers to both herself and innocent bystanders who might become involved in hostile activities. The tension between security requirements and maintaining her civilian cover created operational challenges that Sarah had hoped never to face again. Friday morning's commute used a borrowed vehicle from a colleague who remained unaware of Sarah's security concerns, allowing her to vary her transportation while maintaining the appearance of normal problem-solving for mechanical difficulties. The surveillance presence had intensified overnight, with at least 4 vehicles and multiple foot surveillance operatives positioned throughout her route to school. The coordinated effort suggested significant resources devoted to monitoring her activities, indicating that her cover identity faced serious compromise. During first period mathematics instruction, Sarah noticed unfamiliar individuals conducting what appeared to be maintenance work on utility lines across the street from the school. The workers wore appropriate uniforms and used legitimate equipment, but their positioning provided clear sight lines into her classroom while their activities required no actual utility repair work. Sarah adjusted her lesson delivery to minimize her visibility from the windows while maintaining engaging instruction that kept students focused on learning objectives rather than her modified positioning. The lunch period brought Dr. Wilson to Sarah's classroom with questions about the unusual number of service vehicles that had appeared in the neighborhood during recent days. Parents had begun calling the school office to inquire about construction projects that might affect afternoon dismissal procedures, creating administrative concerns that required explanation. Sarah provided vague responses about possible infrastructure improvements while internally recognizing that surveillance activities were becoming obvious to civilians who lacked training in observation techniques. That afternoon, Sarah received an urgent message through secure channels indicating that hostile intelligence operatives had identified her location and were preparing to approach her directly rather than continuing passive surveillance. The communication included extraction options that would remove her from immediate danger while terminating her civilian identity permanently. Sarah faced the choice between abandoning her teaching career and students or remaining in position, while implementing defensive measures that might compromise innocent people. The decision to remain at Lincoln Elementary reflected Sarah's commitment to her students and her determination not to allow her former life to destroy the meaningful work she had built as an educator. She implemented advanced security protocols while maintaining her teaching schedule, recognizing that any sudden departure would confirm hostile suspicions while potentially endangering colleagues and students who might be targeted for information about her activities and background. Weekend surveillance reached new levels of intensity, with multiple teams positioning themselves throughout Sarah's neighborhood while maintaining round-the-clock coverage of her apartment building. The watchers no longer attempted to conceal their presence, suggesting that the surveillance phase was concluding and that more direct action might be imminent. Sarah prepared for various scenarios, while hoping that her civilian cover might still provide some protection against hostile operatives who remained uncertain about her true identity. Sunday evening brought the first direct approach when two individuals appeared at Sarah's apartment door, claiming to represent a utility company investigating gas line irregularities in the building. Their uniforms appeared authentic, and their explanations seemed plausible. But Sarah's intelligence training identified subtle indicators suggesting hostile operatives using cover identities. She declined to allow them entry while promising to contact the utility company directly to arrange appropriate access during business hours. The attempted entry confirmed that hostile operatives were transitioning from surveillance to direct action, creating immediate threats that required defensive responses. Sarah activated emergency protocols while maintaining the appearance of normal civilian behavior, understanding that any indication of operational awareness might trigger violent confrontation in a residential building where neighbors could be harmed. The balance between security and protecting innocent people required careful calculation of risks and potential consequences. Monday morning arrived with clear evidence that surveillance had been replaced by preparation for direct action against Sarah's position. Multiple vehicles occupied strategic positions around Lincoln Elementary while additional operatives positioned themselves near her apartment building and along her established commute route. The coordinated deployment suggested that hostile forces were preparing simultaneous operations that would prevent her escape while ensuring successful completion of their objectives. Sarah arrived at school knowing that this might be her final day as Miss Chen, the dedicated fourth-grade teacher who had found peace and purpose in education. Her lesson plans were complete, and her classroom was organized for potential substitute teacher coverage, though she hoped that protective measures might allow her to continue serving her students without exposing them to dangers from her former life. The morning instructional routine proceeded normally while Sarah maintained heightened awareness of developing threats. During the first recess period, Sarah observed multiple surveillance operatives positioning themselves around the school perimeter, while maintaining communication with each other through discrete earpiece devices. The coordinated movement suggested that hostile forces were preparing to act during school hours when Sarah's location was predictable and her movement options were limited by responsibility for student safety. The decision to target her at school indicated callous disregard for civilian casualties that characterized certain hostile intelligence organizations. The mathematics lesson that morning focused on problem-solving strategies that required students to analyze complex scenarios and develop systematic approaches to finding solutions. Sarah found ironic parallels between the academic content and her current security situation, though she maintained professional focus on educational objectives. While processing operational threats, her students remained engaged and enthusiastic about learning, providing motivation for Sarah to resolve security threats without disrupting their educational experiences. As the morning progressed, Sarah noticed that hostile operatives were moving closer to the school building while maintaining surveillance of all exits and potential escape routes. The encroachment suggested that direct action was imminent and that her civilian cover would soon be tested by confrontation with professionals who suspected her true identity. The situation required immediate decision-making about protective measures that would ensure student safety while addressing threats to her own security. The lunch period brought a temporary reprieve when hostile surveillance appeared to withdraw from immediate school proximity, possibly in response to increased attention from school security personnel who had noticed unusual activity in the neighborhood. Sarah used this opportunity to coordinate with building administrators about enhanced security measures that could be implemented without alarming students or parents about potential threats. The conversation required careful balance between providing necessary warnings and avoiding panic that might compromise everyone's safety. Afternoon instruction proceeded with Sarah maintaining normal teaching routines while remaining alert for signs that hostile operatives were resuming their approach toward the school. Her students worked collaboratively on science projects that required investigation and analysis skills, creating classroom dynamics that paralleled Sarah's current need to gather information and develop strategic responses to evolving threats. The educational content provided both distraction and metaphorical framework for processing her operational challenges. As dismissal time approached, Sarah observed that surveillance had resumed with hostile operatives positioning themselves to monitor student departure procedures while maintaining coverage of her normal exit routes. The timing suggested that hostile forces planned to act after students had departed, but while Sarah remained vulnerable during her transition from school to vehicle, the window of opportunity represented maximum risk for Sarah, while providing relative protection for students and colleagues who would not be present during any confrontation. The final bell marked the end of instructional time and the beginning of what Sarah recognized might be her last afternoon as a civilian educator. Students gathered their belongings and prepared for dismissal, while Sarah completed normal end-of-day procedures, maintaining routine activities that would not alert children to developing dangers. Her farewells to students carried additional emotional weight as she recognized that protective measures might require permanent separation from the teaching career that had provided meaning and satisfaction. After students departed, Sarah remained in her classroom while implementing final security preparations and considering extraction options that might preserve her civilian identity while addressing immediate threats. The empty school building provided tactical advantages for defensive positioning while limiting collateral damage risks that might affect innocent people. Sarah prepared for confrontation while hoping that diplomatic solutions might still prevent violence that would destroy her peaceful life as an elementary school teacher. The parking lot gradually emptied as colleagues departed for their evening activities, leaving Sarah increasingly isolated while hostile surveillance tightened around her position. The approaching confrontation would test whether 3 years of civilian life had diminished her operational capabilities or whether her intelligence training remained sufficient to protect both herself and the civilian identity she had worked so hard to establish. The outcome would determine whether Miss Chun could continue teaching 4th grade or whether Sarah Chun would be forced to return to the world of shadows and secrets she had tried to leave behind. The gymnasium's emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the polished floor as Sarah heard the first footsteps echoing through the corridor outside her classroom. 5 distinct sets of boots moved with military precision, their cadence suggesting coordinated tactical entry rather than random building exploration. She had positioned herself behind her desk with clear sight lines to both the door and windows, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system, as years of dormant training suddenly reactivated with crystalline clarity. The men who entered her classroom wore civilian clothing, but their bearing and movement patterns revealed extensive combat experience and professional training that exceeded typical criminal organizations. Their leader, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and calculating eyes, surveyed the educational environment with the detached assessment of someone evaluating tactical terrain rather than appreciating the colorful displays of student artwork and inspirational posters that covered nearly every available wall surface. "Miss Chen," the leader spoke with a slight Eastern European accent, his voice carrying the measured tone of someone accustomed to controlling conversations through psychological intimidation rather than volume or obvious threats. "We understand. You've been enjoying your time teaching mathematics to children. Such noble work for someone with your particular background and specialized skill set." Sarah maintained her position behind the desk while keeping her hands visible and her posture non-threatening, recognizing that any sudden movement might escalate the situation toward violence that could endanger everyone in the building. Her voice remained steady and professionally calm as she responded, "I'm afraid you have me confused with someone else. I'm just a 4th grade teacher, and I need to ask you to leave the building immediately. School policy requires all visitors to check in at the main office." The second man, younger with distinctive facial scars that suggested combat experience, moved to position himself near the classroom windows while maintaining visual contact with both Sarah and the door. His positioning revealed tactical training, designed to control potential escape routes while providing backup for his team leader during interrogation activities. The coordination between team members indicated extensive experience working together in hostile environments. "Perhaps we should discuss your time in Prague," the leader continued. Pulling out a tablet device that displayed photographs Sarah immediately recognized as surveillance images from her CIA operations 3 years earlier. "Or maybe you'd prefer to talk about your activities in Budapest, where you so effectively infiltrated the trafficking network that had been operating with apparent immunity for over 2 years. The photographs represented operational intelligence that should have been classified at the highest levels, suggesting that hostile forces had penetrated CIA security systems or recruited assets with access to sensitive personnel files. Sarah's mind raced through implications while maintaining her civilian facade, understanding that confirmation of her operational background would endanger not only herself but potentially compromise ongoing intelligence operations and other deep cover operatives who might still be active in the field. The third team member positioned himself near the classroom door, effectively blocking the primary exit route, while maintaining alertness for any external threats or unauthorized personnel who might interrupt their confrontation. His equipment included communication devices that suggested coordination with additional operatives, positioned throughout the school building or surrounding area. The tactical deployment indicated significant resources devoted to this operation and careful planning designed to prevent Sarah's escape or rescue. "I really don't know what you're talking about," Sarah replied, her teacher training helping her maintain calm authority even under extreme stress. "These look like stock photos that could be anyone. I've never been to Europe, and I certainly don't know anything about trafficking networks or whatever else you're suggesting. You need to leave immediately, or I'll be forced to call security." The leader smiled with cold amusement, recognizing Sarah's continued denial while clearly possessing information that contradicted her civilian identity claims. He gestured to the fourth team member, who produced additional photographic evidence, including images of Sarah meeting with known CIA personnel and entering secure facilities that were clearly inconsistent with her claimed background as a civilian educator who had never worked in intelligence services. "Your handler, Agent Rodriguez, sends his regards," the leader said, watching Sarah's face carefully for any involuntary reaction that might confirm her operational background. "He was quite helpful during our conversation last week, though. He required some persuasion to share details about your current assignment and the specific reasons why the agency decided to place you in this particular school district." The mention of Rodriguez created internal alarms that Sarah struggled to suppress, knowing that her former handler would never voluntarily reveal operational details, regardless of interrogation techniques applied. The implication that Rodriguez had been compromised added urgency to her situation, while confirming that hostile forces possessed detailed knowledge of CIA personnel and operational procedures. The intelligence breach represented catastrophic security failures that extended far beyond her individual cover identity. The fifth team member remained silent near the back of the classroom, his positioning suggesting overwatch responsibilities. While his colleagues conducted the interrogation, his equipment included what appeared to be electronic surveillance devices designed to monitor communications and detect any emergency signals that Sarah might attempt to transmit. The comprehensive preparation indicated that hostile forces understood her potential capabilities and had developed countermeasures for standard CIA emergency protocols. "Rodriguez is a professional," Sarah responded, maintaining her denial while processing the implications of her handler's apparent compromise. "But I've never heard that name before, and I certainly haven't had any conversations with anyone about intelligence assignments or operational activities. You're clearly confusing me with someone else, and this harassment needs to stop immediately." The classroom environment seemed surreal as the confrontation intensified, with educational posters about mathematical problem-solving and character development providing incongruous backdrop for an interrogation that threatened to expose years of carefully maintained cover identity. Student desks arranged for collaborative learning created obstacles that might provide tactical advantages if the situation escalated toward physical confrontation, though Sarah remained committed to avoiding violence that might endanger innocent people. The leader's patience appeared to be diminishing as he produced a secure communication device and activated what appeared to be a recorded conversation featuring Rodriguez's voice discussing Sarah's placement at Lincoln Elementary and her role in monitoring suspected intelligence activities within the local community. The recording quality suggested professional surveillance equipment and techniques that exceeded typical criminal capabilities, confirming that hostile forces possessed sophisticated resources and technical expertise. "Your concern for maintaining operational security is admirable," the leader continued, "but ultimately pointless given our comprehensive knowledge of your background and current assignment. We're prepared to offer arrangements that might prove mutually beneficial, provided you're willing to discuss certain intelligence matters that fall within your area of expertise and operational experience." Sarah's training included extensive preparation for interrogation scenarios, but the classroom setting created unique psychological pressure as she fought to protect both her cover identity and the civilian environment she had worked so hard to establish. The presence of student artwork and educational materials served as constant reminders of the life she had built and the people who might be endangered if her operational background became public knowledge within the school community. The second team member moved closer to Sarah's position while maintaining non-threatening posture, his approach designed to increase psychological pressure without triggering defensive responses that might escalate the confrontation. His movement revealed concealed weapons and communication equipment that confirmed the team's preparation for various scenarios depending on Sarah's level of cooperation with their intelligence-gathering objectives. "I understand you're confused," Sarah said, reaching slowly for her desk phone while maintaining eye contact with the team leader. but I need to contact building security about unauthorized visitors in the school. This conversation needs to happen through proper administrative channels, not in my classroom where it could disturb the learning environment." The leader nodded to his team members, who immediately moved to prevent Sarah's access to communication devices while maintaining their positions, controlling potential escape routes. Their coordination revealed extensive training in hostage situations and interrogation techniques designed to isolate targets while applying graduated pressure that might overcome resistance without resorting to violence that could attract unwanted attention from law enforcement or security personnel. "Communication devices won't be necessary," the leader explained, his tone remaining conversational despite the obvious threat implicit in his team's actions. "Our conversation can remain private and professional, provided you're willing to acknowledge certain realities about your background and discuss matters of mutual interest regarding intelligence activities in this geographic area." The afternoon sunlight streaming through classroom windows created almost normal atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the tension of the confrontation, highlighting the disconnect between Sarah's peaceful civilian life and the operational realities that continued to threaten her carefully constructed new identity. The familiar classroom environment provided psychological grounding while she processed tactical options that might resolve the situation without compromising either her safety or her cover identity. "I think there's been a serious misunderstanding," Sarah continued, her voice maintaining the calm authority she used when addressing parents during difficult conferences about student behavior or academic performance. "I'm a public school teacher with proper credentials and background checks. Whatever information you think you have is clearly incorrect, and continuing this conversation without proper authorization could create legal problems for everyone involved." The third team member produced a secure tablet displaying what appeared to be CIA personnel files containing Sarah's operational history, including classified mission reports and performance evaluations that should have been accessible only to personnel with the highest security clearances. The detailed information confirmed that hostile forces had achieved unprecedented access to sensitive intelligence databases, representing security breaches with implications extending far beyond Sarah's individual situation. "Your performance evaluations were quite impressive," the leader observed, scrolling through classified documents while watching Sarah's face for involuntary reactions that might confirm her identity. "Particularly the mission in Budapest, where you successfully infiltrated the trafficking network and provided intelligence that resulted in arrests of over 30 individuals involved in international human trafficking operations." The specific operational details created internal conflict as Sarah struggled to maintain denial while processing information that could only have come from classified CIA files. The security breach represented catastrophic intelligence failure that endangered numerous operatives and ongoing operations, while her current situation suggested that she had been specifically targeted based on detailed knowledge of her background and capabilities. The fourth team member activated electronic surveillance equipment designed to monitor the classroom for any emergency communication signals or tracking devices that might have been placed by CIA personnel preparing for potential compromise of Sarah's cover identity. The sophisticated equipment suggested that hostile forces understood agency protocols and had developed countermeasures specifically designed to prevent extraction or rescue operations. "Perhaps we could discuss your current assignment," the leader suggested, his tone becoming more direct as he apparently decided that subtle psychological pressure was insufficient to overcome Sarah's resistance. "We understand that your placement at this school wasn't entirely coincidental, and we're curious about the specific intelligence activities you've been conducting while maintaining your cover as an elementary school teacher." The suggestion that her teaching position was itself a cover assignment created new complications, as Sarah realized that hostile forces might have fundamental misunderstandings about her motivations for leaving intelligence work. The assumption that she remained operationally active despite her genuine commitment to civilian life indicated that her decision to completely abandon CIA activities hadn't been communicated to hostile intelligence services that continued to view her as an active threat. "I chose teaching because I wanted to help children learn and grow," Sarah replied with genuine emotion, her commitment to education providing strength as she faced interrogation designed to undermine her civilian identity. There's nothing more meaningful than watching students discover their capabilities and develop confidence in their abilities. That's why I'm here, not because of any intelligence assignment or operational activities. The classroom environment seemed to mock the seriousness of the confrontation as colorful educational displays and student work samples provided cheerful backdrop for an interrogation that threatened to destroy everything Sarah had built during her 3 years of civilian life. The innocence and optimism reflected in student artwork served as constant reminders of what was at stake beyond her personal safety and security concerns. The fifth team member finally spoke, his voice carrying authority that suggested senior operational experience and leadership responsibilities within whatever organization had deployed this team. "Miss Chen, or should we use your operational designation, your reluctance to cooperate is understandable but ultimately counterproductive. We have specific intelligence requirements that fall within your area of expertise, and we're prepared to provide compensation that exceeds your current teaching salary." The mention of compensation confirmed that hostile forces were attempting recruitment rather than simple intelligence gathering, suggesting that their objectives included turning her into an active asset rather than merely extracting information about past operations. The recruitment approach indicated that they valued her operational capabilities and believed that financial incentives might overcome her resistance to returning to intelligence activities. "I don't know what you think I can provide," Sarah sighed, her classroom management training helping her maintain calm authority, even as the situation became increasingly threatening. "I teach mathematics to 4th grade students. My expertise involves lesson planning, assessment strategies, and helping children develop problem-solving skills. Whatever you're looking for, you're in the wrong place." The leader's patience finally appeared exhausted as he gestured to his team members, who immediately moved to more aggressive positions while maintaining their control of potential escape routes. The tactical deployment suggested that they were prepared to escalate toward physical coercion if psychological pressure proved insufficient to overcome Sarah's resistance to cooperation with their intelligence-gathering objectives. "Your loyalty to your cover identity is admirable," the leader acknowledged. "But we're prepared to discuss certain realities that might change your perspective on cooperation. For instance, we know about your evening walks through the Fremont neighborhood, your weekend grocery shopping routines, and your friendship with Marcus Williams, the school custodian who speaks so highly of your dedication to the students." The mention of Marcus created immediate alarm as Sarah realized that hostile surveillance had identified innocent people who might become leverage for forcing her cooperation. The threat to harm civilians who had no connection to intelligence activities represented escalation that required immediate response, regardless of risks to her cover identity or personal safety. The classroom phone rang suddenly, its familiar sound creating momentary distraction as everyone turned toward the device that connected Sarah's room to the main office and emergency communication systems. The timing seemed coincidental, but Sarah's training made her aware that rescue operations often used routine communication channels to coordinate responses, while maintaining operational security that wouldn't alert hostile forces to incoming intervention. "Don't answer that," the leader commanded, his tone becoming sharp as he apparently recognized that external communication might compromise their control of the situation. The phone continued ringing with insistent regularity that suggested urgent communication rather than routine administrative contact that could be ignored or postponed without consequences. The persistence of the phone ringing created psychological pressure that affected everyone in the room, as the familiar sound of normal school operations contrasted sharply with the threatening atmosphere of the confrontation. Sarah remained motionless while processing tactical options that might allow her to respond to potential rescue communication without triggering violent response from hostile operatives who were clearly prepared for various contingencies. After 15 rings, the phone fell silent, leaving an uncomfortable quiet that emphasized the isolation of Sarah's position and the complete control that hostile forces had established over her classroom environment. The silence stretched for several moments before being broken by the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors approaching from the direction of the school district's administrative complex. "Expecting company?" the leader asked, his voice carrying new tension as he apparently recognized that external factors might be disrupting their carefully planned operation. The helicopter sound grew louder, suggesting that aircraft was approaching the school rather than simply passing through the area during routine flight operations. The second team member moved to the windows overlooking the parking lot, his positioning allowing observation of external activities while maintaining coverage of Sarah's position. His communication equipment activated as he apparently reported developments to operational control elements that were coordinating the overall mission from remote locations. "Probably just medical helicopter heading to the hospital," Sarah suggested, though her training made her aware that rescue operations often involved aviation assets that might be disguised as routine emergency services. The helicopter sound continued to grow louder, indicating that aircraft was definitely approaching the school rather than passing through the immediate area. The distinctive sound of multiple vehicles arriving in the school parking lot added new complications as engines shut off and car doors slammed with the rhythmic precision that suggested coordinated arrival of multiple personnel. The timing and coordination indicated official response rather than coincidental civilian activity, creating external pressure that might force hostile operatives to accelerate their timeline or abort their mission entirely. "This is becoming more complicated than anticipated," the leader acknowledged, his communication with external control elements apparently confirming that their operation was facing unexpected interference. The tactical situation was changing rapidly as external factors reduced their control over Sarah's environment and introduced variables that hadn't been included in their original planning. The third team member positioned near the door reported that multiple vehicles had arrived and that uniformed personnel were exiting and moving toward the school building. The description suggested law enforcement or federal agents rather than routine security response, indicating that Sarah's situation had attracted official attention that might provide rescue opportunities if she could maintain her position until intervention arrived. "I really think you should leave now," Sarah said, her voice carrying new confidence as external developments suggested that help might be approaching. "Whatever misunderstanding brought you here can be resolved through proper channels, but staying in the building while security personnel are arriving could create serious legal problems for everyone involved." The leader's expression revealed frustration and calculation as he processed changing tactical circumstances that threatened to compromise his mission objectives. His team members maintained their positions but showed increased alertness and tension that suggested they were preparing for potential extraction under hostile conditions, rather than completing their planned interrogation and recruitment activities. The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside Sarah's classroom indicated that external personnel were moving through the building, their approach suggesting systematic search patterns rather than routine security checks. The coordination and timing indicated official law enforcement response that had been triggered by intelligence about hostile activities rather than coincidental discovery of unauthorized building access. "This conversation isn't over," the leader warned, his tone carrying threat of future contact while acknowledging that current circumstances prevented completion of their immediate objectives. The hostile team began coordinated movement toward alternative exit routes, their tactical withdrawal suggesting extensive preparation for various contingency scenarios. The classroom door burst open as federal agents in tactical gear flooded into the room, their weapons drawn and voices commanding immediate surrender from the hostile operatives who had been interrogating Sarah. The speed and coordination of the federal response indicated sophisticated intelligence, gathering and operational planning that had anticipated this confrontation and prepared appropriate intervention capabilities. FBI, everyone on the ground now. The lead agent's voice carried unmistakable authority as federal personnel established control over the classroom environment. The hostile operatives offered no resistance, suggesting that they had been instructed to avoid violence that might compromise future operations or create international incidents that could affect their organization's broader objectives. Sarah remained behind her desk with hands visible while federal agents secured the hostile operatives and established perimeter control around her classroom. The professional execution of the arrest operation indicated extensive preparation and intelligence gathering about the hostile team's capabilities and intentions, suggesting that federal authorities had been monitoring the situation for some time before intervening. Agent Chen, the lead FBI agent, addressed Sarah using her operational designation, confirming that federal authorities were aware of her CIA background and had coordinated intervention to protect her cover identity while neutralizing immediate threats. "Are you injured? Do you require medical attention?" The use of her operational title in front of hostile operatives confirmed what they had already suspected about her intelligence background, eliminating any remaining value in maintaining denial of her CIA activities. The revelation represented complete compromise of her civilian cover identity, though it also confirmed that federal authorities were prepared to provide protection and support for whatever transition might be necessary. "I'm fine physically," Sarah replied, though the psychological impact of returning to operational status after 3 years of civilian life created internal conflict that would require time and professional support to resolve. "But I think my teaching career just ended permanently, along with everything I've worked to build here." The hostile operatives were removed from the classroom in federal custody while crime scene personnel began documenting evidence and gathering intelligence about their equipment, communication devices, and operational procedures. The thoroughness of the federal response indicated that this incident was part of larger counterintelligence investigation targeting hostile activities throughout the region rather than isolated threat against Sarah's individual position. 6 months after the classroom confrontation, Sarah stood before a joint congressional committee investigating foreign intelligence operations targeting American educators and government personnel. The mahogany-paneled hearing room buzzed with controlled tension as senators and representatives prepared to hear testimony about a spy network that had infiltrated multiple school districts across the Pacific Northwest, using teachers and administrators as unwitting intelligence sources. The federal investigation had revealed that the hostile operatives who confronted Sarah were part of a sophisticated Russian intelligence operation called Blackboard, designed to identify and recruit former intelligence officers who had transitioned to civilian careers in education. The network had been operating for over 5 years, using detailed personnel records stolen from government databases to track down retired operative and pressure them into providing intelligence about current CIA operations and personnel. Sarah's testimony detailed how the Russian team had attempted to exploit her genuine commitment to teaching while using threats against innocent civilians to force cooperation. The congressional committee learned that similar recruitment attempts had occurred in Denver, Portland, and Sacramento, targeting former intelligence officers who believed their civilian careers provided complete separation from their operational past. The scope of the operation had endangered dozens of schools and thousands of students who attended institutions where former operatives worked. The FBI's counterintelligence division had been tracking the Blackboard network for 18 months before Sarah's situation provided the breakthrough that allowed them to identify key operatives and communication methods. Agent Martinez, who had coordinated Sarah's protection, explained to the committee how Sarah's refusal to cooperate had ultimately led to arrests of 15 Russian intelligence officers and the disruption of recruitment operations across multiple states. The hostile operatives arrested in Sarah's classroom had been identified as members of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, operating under diplomatic cover while conducting systematic recruitment of former American intelligence personnel. Their leader, Viktor Petrov, had been expelled from the United States along with 12 other diplomatic personnel, who were declared persona non grata for activities incompatible with their official status. Sarah's decision to maintain her cover identity despite overwhelming pressure had protected not only herself, but also other former operatives who might have been compromised if she had revealed CIA training methods and personnel information. The Congressional Committee recognized her actions as preventing significant damage to American intelligence capabilities while demonstrating exceptional courage under extreme circumstances. The aftermath of the confrontation had required complete reconstruction of Sarah's civilian identity, as her teaching position at Lincoln Elementary could no longer provide the anonymity she had sought when leaving intelligence work. The FBI's Witness Protection Program had initially offered relocation to a different state with new identity documents, but Sarah had requested an alternative that would allow her to continue serving in education while maintaining appropriate security measures. The solution emerged through coordination between the Department of Education and the CIA's Career Transition Office, which had been established to support former operatives seeking civilian careers. Sarah was offered a position developing curriculum for a new federal program that would train teachers to recognize and report suspicious activities that might indicate foreign intelligence operations targeting American schools and educational institutions. The new role allowed Sarah to combine her intelligence expertise with her passion for education, while serving national security interests in ways that felt meaningful rather than destructive. The program she developed became mandatory training for educators in districts with high concentrations of government employees or military families, providing practical skills for recognizing potential threats while maintaining focus on educational objectives. Dr. Wilson, Sarah's former principal, had been briefed about the general nature of the security threat without receiving details about Sarah's intelligence background. The school district implemented enhanced security protocols while maintaining that Sarah's departure was related to family obligations that required relocation. Students and parents were told that Ms. Chen had accepted a position with the federal government that would allow her to help schools nationwide. Marcus Williams, the custodian who had greeted Sarah each morning, received a personal visit from FBI agents who explained that Sarah's sudden departure was related to national security matters, and that she had asked them to express her gratitude for his friendship and support. The conversation was carefully managed to provide closure without revealing operational details that might endanger other personnel or compromise ongoing investigations. Sarah's students at Lincoln Elementary sent letters to her new office at the Department of Education, expressing appreciation for her teaching and sharing news about their continued academic progress. The correspondence was reviewed by security personnel before delivery, but the genuine affection and gratitude expressed by her former students provided emotional validation that her decision to leave intelligence work had been correct despite the complications that followed. The classroom where Sarah had been confronted was converted into a computer lab, with new security features that included enhanced communication systems and discrete surveillance capabilities. The changes were presented as routine technology upgrades, but they reflected lessons learned about protecting educational environments from foreign intelligence operations that might target schools as recruitment venues or intelligence gathering locations. 3 years after the congressional testimony, Sarah received the CIA's Distinguished Intelligence Cross in a classified ceremony recognizing her service during the Budapest trafficking investigation and her subsequent protection of American intelligence capabilities during the Russian recruitment attempt. The award remained classified, but it acknowledged her unique contribution to both operational success and institutional security over the course of her intelligence career. The federal education security program that Sarah developed had been implemented in over 3,000 school districts, training more than 50,000 educators to recognize potential intelligence threats while maintaining focus on their primary educational responsibilities. The program's success led to international requests for similar training from allied nations seeking to protect their educational institutions from foreign intelligence operations. Sarah's current office in downtown Washington provided views of monuments and government buildings that reminded her daily of the larger purposes served by her work. The transition from elementary classroom to federal policy development represented evolution rather than abandonment of her commitment to education, allowing her to influence educational security on a scale that individual teaching could never achieve. The Russian intelligence officers arrested during the Blackboard investigation were prosecuted in federal court, with several receiving lengthy prison sentences for espionage activities. Their trial provided public attention to foreign intelligence threats targeting American educators, leading to congressional funding for enhanced security training and support for educational institutions that might be vulnerable to similar operations. 5 years after leaving Lincoln Elementary, Sarah received an invitation to speak at her former school's graduation ceremony for 5th grade students who were moving on to middle school. The invitation came through official channels with appropriate security clearances, allowing her to return to the place where her peaceful civilian life had been shattered, but where she had also discovered the strength to protect innocent people from foreign intelligence threats. Standing at the podium where she had once conducted parent-teacher conferences, Sarah addressed an audience of families whose children had been unknowingly protected by her refusal to cooperate with hostile intelligence operatives. She spoke about the importance of education in building strong communities and preparing young people to face challenges with courage and integrity, themes that reflected both her teaching experience and her intelligence background. After the ceremony, several former colleagues approached Sarah to express gratitude for her service to the school and curiosity about her current work with the federal government. The conversations were warm but necessarily limited, as security requirements prevented detailed discussion of her activities or the circumstances surrounding her departure from teaching. The connections reminded her of relationships she had valued during her brief time as Miss Chun, the dedicated 4th grade teacher. The drive away from Lincoln Elementary took Sarah past familiar neighborhoods where she had once walked peacefully, planning lessons and enjoying the simple pleasures of civilian life. The memories were bittersweet, representing both loss of innocence and confirmation that her intelligence training could be used to protect rather than merely gather information about potential threats to American interests. Her apartment that evening contained photographs from both her teaching career and her current federal service, creating visual timeline of professional evolution that reflected personal growth and institutional contribution. The images of smiling 4th grade students reminded her that individual acts of courage could have consequences extending far beyond immediate circumstances, protecting countless innocent people who would never know their safety had been threatened. Sarah's quiet victory had transformed federal approaches to protecting former intelligence operatives who sought civilian careers while also enhancing security for educational institutions that might be targeted by foreign intelligence services. Her story became case study in training programs for both educators and intelligence professionals, demonstrating how individual integrity could serve both personal values and national security interests. The lessons learned from the Blackboard investigation continued to influence federal policy, years after the original confrontation, creating lasting institutional changes that protected both former operatives and the civilian communities they joined. Sarah's decision to maintain her civilian identity despite overwhelming pressure had achieved victory that extended far beyond personal survival to encompass systemic improvements in national security and educational protection. 10 years later, Sarah received a handwritten letter that would forever change how she viewed her journey from CIA operative to elementary school teacher to federal security consultant. The envelope bore no return address, but the careful penmanship suggested a young writer working hard to communicate something important to an adult who had impacted their life in ways they were only beginning to understand. The letter came from Jessica Martinez, now a sophomore at Georgetown University studying international relations with a focus on counterintelligence. Jessica had discovered through careful research and family connections that her beloved fourth-grade teacher, Miss Chen, was actually a decorated intelligence officer whose classroom had been the site of a federal operation that prevented Russian spies from compromising American national security. Jessica's letter described how Sarah's mathematics, lessons about pattern recognition and problem-solving had inspired her academic focus on intelligence analysis. The systematic thinking approaches that Sarah had taught through elementary mathematical concepts had provided foundation for Jessica's current studies in threat assessment and national security policy. Without knowing about her teacher's operational background, Jessica had absorbed lessons that extended far beyond fourth-grade curriculum requirements. The young woman explained that her university research into the Blackboard investigation had revealed Sarah's role in protecting educational institutions from foreign intelligence recruitment operations. Jessica had connected news reports about unnamed federal witnesses with her memories of Miss Chen's sudden departure from Lincoln Elementary during her fifth-grade year. The timeline and circumstances had eventually led her to understand that her elementary school teacher was the unnamed hero, whose testimony had protected thousands of educators and students across the country. Jessica's letter expressed gratitude, not only for academic instruction, but for demonstrations of quiet courage that had influenced her career aspirations and personal values. She wrote about planning to join the FBI's counterintelligence division after graduation, hoping to follow Sarah's example of protecting innocent people from threats they might never recognize or understand. The career choice represented direct inspiration from a teacher whose true impact had remained hidden for years. The correspondence included updates about other students from Sarah's Lincoln Elementary class who had been similarly influenced by their fourth-grade experience. David Townsend, the student who had struggled with morning routines and homework completion, had developed exceptional organizational skills that led to acceptance at the Naval Academy, where he was studying cybersecurity. His transformation from struggling student to military academy midshipman reflected foundational skills that Sarah had patiently developed during their brief time together. Several other former students had pursued careers in education, public service, and security-related fields, suggesting that Sarah's influence extended beyond academic instruction to character development and civic responsibility. The pattern indicated that her year of teaching at Lincoln Elementary had created ripple effects that continued expanding years after her departure from the classroom. Sarah responded to Jessica's letter with carefully worded appreciation that acknowledged their shared interest in national security while maintaining operational security, requirements that still governed her federal service. The correspondence led to an ongoing mentorship relationship that allowed Sarah to provide career guidance to a young woman whose academic pursuits had been directly inspired by elementary school experiences that neither had fully understood. At the time, the exchange prompted Sarah to reflect on the unexpected ways that her brief teaching career had influenced both her personal development and her professional contributions to national security. The classroom management skills she had developed while teaching fourth grade had enhanced her ability to facilitate training programs for educators and federal personnel. The patience and communication techniques required for elementary instruction had improved her effectiveness in briefing senior officials about complex security threats. More importantly, her experience as Ms. Chen had provided perspective on the human cost of intelligence work that shaped her approach to developing policies that protected both national security interests and civilian communities. The understanding of ordinary people's lives and concerns that she had gained through teaching informed her federal work in ways that purely operational experience could never have achieved. Sarah's current position involved overseeing international cooperation in educational security, working with allied nations to develop comprehensive approaches to protecting schools and universities from foreign intelligence operations, the programs. She supervised trained thousands of educators annually while building relationships with international partners who faced similar threats from hostile intelligence services seeking to exploit educational environments for recruitment and espionage purposes. The work required frequent travel to NATO countries and Pacific allies, but Sarah found satisfaction in knowing that her efforts protected children and educators who would never know their safety depended on security measures developed by someone who understood both the threats they faced and the educational environments they cherished. The global scope of her impact represented fulfillment of purposes that had motivated her original decision to leave intelligence operations and pursue civilian education career. 10 years after the Blackboard investigation, federal education security programs had prevented dozens of foreign intelligence recruitment attempts targeting former government employees who worked in educational institutions. The success rate reflected lessons learned from Sarah's experience and systematic improvements in threat detection and personnel protection that had emerged from comprehensive analysis of Russian intelligence methods and objectives. The program's effectiveness had attracted international attention, with requests for training and consultation from over 30 countries seeking to protect their educational institutions from similar threats. Sarah had personally briefed education ministers and intelligence officials in countries ranging from South Korea to the United Kingdom, sharing expertise that combined operational knowledge with genuine understanding of educational priorities and concerns. Her final letter to Jessica included reflection on how seemingly ordinary choices could have extraordinary consequences when guided by principle and commitment to protecting innocent people. Sarah wrote about learning that heroism often required quiet persistence rather than dramatic action, and that the most important victories might be invisible to those they protected. The correspondence concluded with Sarah's observation that Jessica and her former classmates represented the true measure of her teaching success, not because of their academic achievements, but because of their commitment to service and protection of others. The young people who had learned pattern recognition and problem-solving in her fourth-grade classroom were now applying those skills to defend their communities and nation in ways that created lasting security and prosperity. Sarah's story had become legend within federal training programs, though her identity remained protected and her specific contributions were known only to those with appropriate clearances. The legend focused on themes of duty, sacrifice, and the unexpected places where national security intersected with ordinary American life, inspiring new generations of both educators and intelligence professionals to recognize their shared responsibility for protecting the freedoms that made both education and democracy possible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.